It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego.
Okay, and welcome to week 2. This is RL Radio on NRL show Better Than Lego. This week we're going to talk a little bit, look at the shortened fixtures from the weekend, then ahead to look at Origin, perhaps touch upon the World Cup, and then a look forward as well to the next week's games, as well as covering the implications with the lockdown in Sydney and what that's possibly going to mean to some of the teams. First of all, joining me is Paul Cunliffe, Sadfish of RL fans.
Good evening,
Paul.
Mike.
Fairly light fixture, just the 4 games. Started off on Thursday with Manly versus Canberra, where Manly flying high and expected possibly to edge it closer into the top 4. Fell apart at the hands of a rejuvenated Canberra side. Then we had a Cody Walker masterclass on Friday. I don't know if you saw either of these games. Certainly, I don't know if you saw the Souths versus North Queensland. Quite possibly the best 5/8 performance I've seen for a good while by Cody Walker this week. Then what for me was the big game of the round, or the best game of the round, which surprisingly was the Bulldogs against the Roosters. The Bulldogs putting up a fight. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then Cunliffe seeing off the Warriors, who I believe now were lost 7 out of 8, and are really struggling perhaps to get into the into the playoffs, into the final series. Yeah. But wanted to talk about Canterbury versus Roosters. I don't know if you saw the game, Paul.
Yeah, I did see the game. Very close game. Well, I thought the Bulldogs, they had a good first half. I thought they were on top a little bit more in the first half. I thought Thompson played well. I know he's the Englishman in that team, but I thought that once he went off, they struggled quite considerably. I'm not suggesting that he was the only thing that was the problem. But, Lachlan Lewis was working the ball well, scored a couple of tries off his own kicks. So, by the time, half time had come around and 3/4 of the way through the match, I just think that it was just too far for the Dogs. They ran out of steam, I thought, halfway through, maybe even earlier than halfway through the second half. And I thought in the end, they were lucky to kind of just stay, 6 points in it in the end. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I think that's the first summary of it. I did have a look at the stats. I know they mentioned during the game that Willie Hargreaves had rattled up 221 metres. It was that he'd done. I can't remember what Thompson's was now. Was it maybe about 120 or something like that, which is a bit low for him compared to what I've seen from his most of his Bulldogs efforts. But that said, he was backed up this time. I think Dylan Napper actually recorded over 100 metres, which might have been the first or second time.
Exactly, yeah.
Done that.
Yeah, I mean, for the Roosters, Victor Radley was back, wasn't he? He's been banned for 5 matches. So, I think they just had too much in the end. I think Sam Walker was the last try of the match, and it just felt like they were never going to win that game after half time. The forwards of the Bulldogs forwards just seemed to just disappear. That didn't come to be the talking point of the match. I don't know if you saw the very end of the match when Sam Walker took a 90-metre run back up into his own half, and all of the purists were up in arms. What the hell is he doing? It's it's against the rules. And we all know that it's not against the rules, really, is it? Come on, it might be against like ungentlemanly behaviour or something, but it isn't his first rodeo either. He did it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, I got involved in a minor Twitter discussion about that with someone saying it, and I wouldn't necessarily call myself a purist, but yeah, I just thought it was a bit. I think the game deserves a bit more respect than that. I mean, I know other players have done it, but not running 90 metres. I mean, there's other ways that you can kill the game off like that. Yeah. It just seems a bit silly and a bit juvenile, really. I think.
I agree.
I remember a couple of years ago when Vossi was talking about a game, and who was it? It doesn't matter who it was. It Canberra. I think it was Canberra against Melbourne or something like that. And then the final minute, there was a penalty. I say final minute, it was like the final 10 seconds. There was a penalty to whoever it was attacking, and they was never going to. They were 12, 18 points down, so they were never going to win. But he went to kick it to touch, but somebody, I can't remember what it was now, somebody was offside or something like that. So he basically prolong the play, and then they took another play, and then there was a high tackle on that one side. It was only one tackle left, and then there was another penalty given. So essentially, it took 3 to 5 minutes to play one play.
Yeah.
And Voss's comment was, "Well, if we're trying to go the game, somebody explain that to the Chinese. What's just happened?"
Yeah, impossible.
There's that sort of vibe about it. But I think the one thing I will say is, and I've had this conversation a few times with friends about Canterbury, is I cannot understand how Lachlan Lewis cannot get into that side.
Yeah.
A team with no halfbacks.
Yeah.
He's got one of the strongest, I won't say, we're talking Cleary or Reynolds level, but he's clearly got one of the stronger kicking games for a halfback.
Yeah.
And reading Jamie Soward talking about it on the NRL, saying that whenever he is in, he does provide a bit of stability for the other halfback. It takes a bit of pressure off that. And he's strong defensively, and he can never get into the team.
Yeah, I don't agree that he should be out of the team either. I think he's, he's perhaps in a team as well that's on the back foot a little bit, even though they're coming up close to the Roosters. There's still. I think we spoke about the Bulldogs' fall from grace last week. And if you're coming up within 6 points of the Roosters, this stage of the season, and he's your halfback, go with it.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yeah, well, they might as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got Burton coming next year. We talked about that last week. So they got the backs next year, but I suppose, that's the other conversation that the board needs to have in terms of what support they're going to get in the forwards or what they're going to do in the forwards. But that's talked perhaps another time. Okay, so looking forward then this week on Wednesday, we have the deciding Origin, which is held up in, we're up in Gold Coast, aren't we, for the third, which could be a potential series win, the first time in, is it 20 years or something like 21 years for New South Wales. Don't really want to talk about that. I'm not really that bothered about a dead rubber match. It might mean a lot for Origin fans, New South Wales, Queensland. More interested in perhaps in the, the issues that rising around it, which is what is the point of Origin if there's no international series at the end of the year? If Origin is about selecting kangaroos, what's the point in it?
Well, I'd disagree with that. I think that you're right. Was what we led to believe that Origin is a way to select Australians for tour or whatever. However, I don't believe the money that returns from the Australian tours is anywhere even close to what Origin brings in. So I think that if you look at it like from a monetary point of view, I really don't believe that anybody's interested in international game when they're making the decisions about Origin and who plays for Origin. I think it's primarily the tribal Queensland, New South Wales, get them all riled up, get the adverts coming in, get them watching in the pubs and in the leagues, clubs where, memberships right up this last few years, especially in New South Wales, because they're on a roll. I just think that's what they're interested in. I don't think they're interested in the international scene, but I don't believe that they don't look at it as a way of forming a team for the Australian squad. I don't believe.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not picking just Australians, then it does kind of render that discussion point about it being a selection process for the Kangaroos, renders that moot, really. And I don't mention this last week, the suggestion that not all the best players are Australian anymore. Yeah. So there is a drive to get more, let's use the Polynesian catch-all bracket, to get those players involved, because a lot of them now are the best players. I mean, I can't say I've been a fan of Origin I found it a bit boring, to be honest with you, the last 15 years. I find that without the input of a structured game plan, it just becomes a fairly monotonous, I will say, bore fest. I mean, I know we've had a couple of classics, but all too often, I just think the lack of proper structured game plans that you get, when you watch a Penrith, when you watch a Melbourne, when you watch South Sydney, the way they move the ball out, there's a fluidity that really lacks in Origin. I don't think it's the spectacle that people think it is.
Yeah, I think a couple of players have basically driven Origin for the last 10 years, probably. Your Lockyers, your Thurstons, and your Cam Smiths, and a lot of the other players have been feeding off those three, and it's just been a bit of a. I agree. I'm a big Origin fan. I watch it every time it's on. However, it does seem to have fallen a little bit from its perch. And maybe some of that is to do with the fact that, some of the Polynesian players and the Samoan players and whatnot, the Kiwis, in fact, even are probably sticking to their own nation teams instead of like years ago when Sivan Asiva came on board and that they switched early on, and that was it. Then they were in the Australian side, they were in the, the Queensland side or the New South Wales side, depending on who they were. But these days, if you're too, I think you've got to be in Australia at 14 or something and playing. I don't know for sure. And if you're not, then you're not going to get picked at the moment. Now, I don't know how long that'll go because they're not running out of players. There's loads of players in Australia. It's a wash with players. It's the big sport. But there is a bit of a quality issue. We talked about that last week, especially, now that Thurston's retired and Smith's retired, Cooper Cronk, all these fantastic players have gone. They've got a good, they were talking last week about Cody Walker being the new Cliff Lyons. Okay. I'm okay with that. He's a great player and he might turn into that kind of player, but I'm not sure we should be, picking people like Cliff Lyons as replacements now. If you see what I mean. I just don't think they've got the quality at the moment. But, that might just be because they've not focused on the problems they've got in Origin, because they've had Thurston, they've had Smith, they've had Cooper Cronk, Billy Slater, all these, players have been coming through, been fantastic players, and they've been kind of putting the dazzling, shiny pixie dust on top of everything. There's a bit of a problem, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you say that. I suppose perhaps we're in a period now where I wouldn't say a lull, because there's obviously some quality talent coming through. I think it was Cleary 23, 24, I think it's 23, isn't he? Lou Wise 21, something like that, 22, excuse me. Several of the other youngsters coming through. Sam Walker, they got the Hammer playing again on Wednesday to try and tackle Tommy Turbo, for that matter. He's still relatively fresh, still relatively young. Ponga, so there is a lot coming through. I think perhaps I always find the progression of the youngsters very exciting. I mean, particularly my age now, where you want to see something new, somebody who can do something different. You don't necessarily don't get me wrong, I love watching the veterans and love watching them play, but I don't think there's anything as much as exciting as when you see like your Reece Walsh or your Sam Walker, and they're talking about them now and how exciting they are. And some of them won't make the grade. It's happened in the past before, but I suppose you kind of, as a community, as a fan base, really, we're sort of looking for, which are the next superstars coming through the sport. Same over here as it is all over there. One thing that I want to mention about the Origin is that they're going through the process now where Sydney's been locked down and all the teams are having to relocate now to Queensland, which creates problems for the NRL competition itself. I know that they've said that they will support players and families in terms of going up there. I think there's a 14-day isolation period for families who are following players. And they've said that players who have family issues, so I think Aaron Woods was mentioned as one, Cody Nikarima as ones who have pregnant partners who may decide to sit out the rest of the season altogether, or may decide to put something else in place. And the reason why I suppose this is important, I mean, it doesn't really affect Origin so much, but one thing it does affect is, or potentially does affect, is the World Cup. This year, because they're having to get travel restrictions lifted to get out of New South Wales. What sort of impact do you think this may have on any constructive talks for the World Cup later this year?
Well, you've said it yourself, they can't even get out of New South Wales at the moment. I can't get out of England really, but England and Wales. It's not happening for me at the moment. But going back to the Gold Coast situation, they're going to lose. Apparently, I was reading today, or I was hearing today, that if they don't move everybody, it'll be £30 million a week they'll lose if the games are cancelled.
Yeah.
But if they do move everybody, it'll only be £10 million a week. Okay, the costs are only 10 million a week. Okay, so when people talk about players in Australia coming to play Super League, oh, why have we not signed Cody Walker this year? I sometimes see this on the boards, you know, the top player. Then that's why, because the money in Australia is totally different. So if you put the money together, and as I said earlier, when you talk about international competition, there's no incentive financially to these clubs or these players to come out to England, you know, unless they're at the end of their career and they come into play for months, you know, maybe a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
So unless I don't believe there's as much money put into the World Cup as people perhaps think. I think, you know, we might be £1 million in or something. I think the government put in about £1 million or something in the UK. So, and to postpone it to next year, not a big problem. You know, they did it with the Euros, which is a multi-million-pound competition. They did it with the Olympics, and they look at the Olympics as struggling big time because they're going to have to go through with it, and teams are not be able to make it due to there's various restrictions at various levels in various countries. It's not a simple roll of dice. We're going.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, I mean, they hadn't they spent, or they got a loan, isn't it, 25 million for the World Cup, isn't it? And I think that puts in context, you know, talk about the NRL losing $30 million a week, or a month, whatever it was. Was it a week? And we're talking 25 million to host the Rugby League World Cup.
Yeah.
That kind of puts a bit of context on that. And I think one of the things for me is that the big thing about our World Cup, no matter what the sport is, overseas visitors come in, you know, the festival of sport, whatever it is, you know, that was one of the things that was always great about when they had the football tournaments in the same country. You know, they moved them for some reason, is that it creates a festival, a kind of atmosphere. We've all been to a World Cup. We know what it's like. You know, I'd love the opportunity to go to Australia, New Zealand, you know, perhaps to go and watch one, maybe even America, or France. In fact, I think they've nominated themselves, haven't they, to host the next one, which is within travelling distance and within money. But
well, let me say this, okay? Rugby league's in a good position, okay? We're lucky in that we don't have the same financial outlays that the Football League do with regards to the Euros and the World Cups, and the money lost from the Rugby League, whilst it'll be not good if they move it, won't be anything like the percentage of money lost. Because for us, you know, we're lucky to know what the fixtures are anyway, a couple of months in advance. Never mind, you know, the whole tournament.
Well, I mean, they said about constructive talks, and I can't see how we can plan now an event for October or whenever, September, October. Bear in mind, we don't. I know they're saying the country's opened, but it can just very quickly close down as well. The last thing you want to be lumbered with is costs that you've booked in.
Exactly.
That you then have to pick up again. Whereas if we don't book anything in, you know, we save the money. I mean, if last minute you could arrange something, but I cannot see the sort of freedom of movement that we need for the competition to go ahead across the several countries that would be involved. Because, you know, you are talking like 16, I don't know how many are in the scheduled for the World Cup, 12, 16, something like that usually, isn't it? So getting players moving around, you know, from wherever they're traveling, some from here, some from New Zealand, you know, obviously some from Papua New Guinea as well. Don't even know. Begin to think about what their COVID protocols, regulations may be at the moment. Who knows?
The only thing that's going for Britain is it's Plague Island. So anyone coming here isn't going to be any worse. There's nowhere as bad as it at the moment. Well, apart from India maybe, but they're not coming. So, you know, there's only a few places worse than Britain for plague at the moment. So it's no big deal them coming here. The biggest problem is getting the games on and getting the fans in the stadiums. Now, if the Australians only send, you know, a second team, which will be still a good team, or if the daft idea that some people have had that we're going to raise a local Australian team from Britain comes to fruition, then it's going to be a disaster. Whereas if I'm pretty sure the NRL have already said the preferred option is to postpone it to next year. I don't know for sure, but if I was in the shoes, and they're a savvy bunch in the NRL, unlike our lot. They'll be on it, I reckon, and their first option will be, okay, we'll keep an eye on it for a few weeks. We don't have to make a rash decision now.
Yeah.
But our probable option at the moment is to postpone it to next year. And I think the inevitable is in the RFL's hands at the moment. And I just think they're just sitting on it. I don't think there's anything they can do for now.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair enough. That really. Just going back onto the Sydney lockdown thing that we just briefly discussed on there. One of the things that was reading about was the sort of impact that it had last year with Melbourne, who had to relocate. And I know they talked about it being difficult, but at the same time, a very positive experience for the team because you have players who were close together. They were there with each other all the time, so they're spending downtime with each other. It sort of created an extra level of bond that they might not have had, which they claim, or they have said, contributed to the success last year, to the run to the winning the grand final. And I know the Warriors have mentioned it previously as well, that it kind of helped them in terms of bonding because they were away, but they're obviously going to face some impact now because there's some players who might not come across. I think Ken Mamalo, I think is one of them who might not be coming across. I've already mentioned Cody Nikarima. They're sat in 13th, I think, in the table or something, aren't they? The Warriors at the moment. The other, I don't know, one of the other things that I was reading about was it was where the AFL teams, because the AFL, the Aussie rules now, I don't really know where half of these teams are, or anything like that. But I know from reading one of them, the team that eventually won, I can't remember who it was now, that the gentleman, one of the captains or something like that, I don't know, it was a photograph of him carrying the trophy and his partner, that she'd almost committed suicide last season because she was on Instagram and taking a photograph of herself in a I don't know, I can't remember whether she was getting a massage or beautician or something, or her, so it was something along those lines. And then obviously, when she posted it to Instagram, she was inundated with the usual tossers and abusers, effing and jeffing at her, and she was unprepared, she said, for the sort of pressure and expectation that had come with that, because she wasn't aware, she said, of the protocols, what she could. As far as she was concerned, she was just having a day away from from a partner, and having a spa day, whatever you want to call it. And then the next minute she's like sent, because it's like completely different over there, isn't it? It's like football sort of exposure, isn't it? For those sports, so that kind of harassed and harangued constantly, and I suppose that's a concern for the for the protocol. I'm not sure what sort of impact it has on the game generally.
Well, but I think this time round there's a bit of a disaster waiting, I think, and I don't believe that the disaster will be in the families of the players so much, because maybe this time around they'll realise that some of the families will be left on their own, the wives and the kids. In this case, there's obviously we've got the women's game as well, so it might be the fellas and the kids in some respect, but certainly in this position. But there's a lot of problems with regards to they're only going into 4 hotels. It's going to be 12 teams in 4 hotels. Now, I've been on rugby tours before, and if there's beer in these hotels, and there's there's all these teams together in 4 hotels for what's going to be the next part. You say 4 weeks, but I think that's going to be 12 weeks personally. There's going to be all sorts of. They've said if anybody breaches protocols, they're going to get expelled from the groups. You're expelling the whole family essentially, aren't you? If you're off back to Sydney, mate. With your family. So they're obviously family. They've obviously thought about the family coming with them, and that's possibly down to some of these experiences that people have had. Because a lot of these players' wives and are on a lot of there's a lot of. They're like British football players, exactly as you said. The families are split out from society, and they don't really engage with, so they don't really understand what's going on half the time because they live in a different world. We've all seen this in the UK with football. So I think that they're doing the right thing. based on what you've mentioned. But at the same time, I think they're putting them all in three hotels or four hotels, all close to each other, on the Gold Coast, the playground, Surfers Paradise,
Sim City.
Sin City, the whole, what could go wrong?
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, it's 800 people, I think they said, 800 personnel it involves.
Yeah.
And that seems conservative, that, I suppose, thinking about, you've got squads of like 25, 30 players, you're going to have to take more, for your extra up as well, plus your coaching staff. Yeah, be interested to see how they work out. I think the sort of impact it play on the rest of the season, I don't know. I think we can safely say, I think, it seems like, well, you never know with the Warriors, they could benefit from it. It could rebuild that sort of
no, I'll tell you now that they've lost that. The return game's gone as well that they were going to do in New Zealand, and they'll be devastated. You know, they're down and out in my opinion this year, and that's really sad because they've done so much for the game.
Yeah,
I've mentioned this last week that and you know what, they've not like they've been whacked every week. There's been 7 games, 7 or 8 games where they could have won. All of those games, the twist of a single play. And it's such a sad situation, but that's rugby league, I suppose. Talking of the Warriors game, did you see the Cunliffe Jack Williams when he did his WWF try celebration? I thought it was brilliant. There was a light-hearted thing going on in the game. We need more of that, I think. There's a lot of serious stuff going on, and that's fine. But seeing those, that was brilliant, and I was like, yes, that's what I like to see. I know it's unusual, and some of the coaches were like, some of the commentators were like, oh well, what happens if somebody gets injured when you're doing stuff like that? Well,
no.
Let them explore the try celebrations a bit more, in my opinion.
I agree with you on that one. There was a belty the other week, and now I've completely forgotten about it. It's one of the best try celebrations I've seen. I'll have to have a think about it. I can't remember what it was. Talking about the Warriors, that leads us into this week's fixtures. We'll start with them. Although the Thursday game is Gold Coast against Parramatta, well, let's get the Warriors out of the way while talking about them. They've got a home battle against Penrith.
Deep breath.
Second. Cleary, I think, is due back in 3 to 4 weeks, as is Luai, and I think he's due back in 2-3 weeks. So any prediction, any expectations there on the Warriors perhaps pulling off a short result?
I don't know. They'll always, the Warriors always give a good game. They'll always do right to the very end. They'll fight and fight and fight. So I think the Panthers are going to win, but again, it'll be 10 points maybe at the most. I just don't see the Warriors don't really do blowouts. They're going to prove me wrong now, aren't they? But really, I think 10 points. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know. I mean, the Warriors have always been the same issue for the last 5-10 years, isn't it? And particularly under Kearney. I remember 2-3 years ago they were playing. I think it's when South were really flying at the top, and the defence they put on that day was like one of the best. The speed of the defensive line, which is something I've kind of associated with Nathan Brown teams as well, was phenomenal. And when they play that physical, we know how good they can be, but then they play that physical game, but they just seem to offer nothing with the ball in hand, which is a surprise because they have got the talent. Yeah. They've certainly got the back line where they can rattle up some points. The halfbacks are solid. I wouldn't say either of them would maybe a first pick. So I was picking drafting a fantasy league team or anything like that. But they're good, solid. I do like what's his name? Harris. The can't remember his name. It's not.
We've got Sean Johnson going back next year as well, so that might help them next year in the halves.
Yeah, but they've got some good players because the thing is going as well. The Cheese.
Yeah.
Geez, he's heading over there. I can't remember who else he's got. There was somebody mentioned last week as well. So I think, again, Jamie Soward mentioned he's expecting to be top 4, challenging for top 4 next year.
Good.
I don't think so. I think top 6 maybe, might be a place. But I think when you've been out of the finals for a while, there's teams like the Warriors and Gold Coast have. I think you have to set your targets honestly, which is like 8th place, 8 to 6.
Yeah. Targets definitely those last 2 playoff places for sure. Absolutely, I fully agree. So, what do you think? 10 points?
No, I'll be honest with you. I think Penrith are good for a good 2 or 3 tries, but no kicker. Well, yeah, let's say 2 or 3 tries for me. Yeah, 18, 16, 18.
Okay.
Well, it'd be 14 won it because there's no Cleary, so there's 2 missed goals. Okay, I'm talking
I
about
like your thinking, yeah.
squeeze into the finals for a rare occasion. Thursday's night game, the opener for the weekend, I think is a potential belter. Gold Coast, the team who I think they've got the 7th best attack or rattling up points, but the defence ranks, I'm not sure if it's about 12th or 13th or something, hosting the Eels. Parramatta 4th, whose only losses have been against the top 4 or teams around them. Clint Gutherson, can the Titans hang on to Clint Gutherson? That's the question for me. And of course, Isaiah Papali'i, the breakout star of 2021.
I think they can. I think Holbrook's is moving them all in the right direction. The whole club. And I do. You know, I'm not saying that just as because he was over here and playing in Super League, coaching the Super League. I think he is. They realise he's got a good brain on him across the whole organisation, not just on the park. So, and you know, they're in 11th, I think, at the moment. They're not, 10th, 10th are they? Oh yeah,
2 points off.
So you know, if you're vying for the 8th, where are they going to go? These players, you know, the cap is quite tight. I would guess that the cap in those teams above the Titans, they're probably fully capped, fully up. So some of these players aren't going to get a look in up above them. Why would you move below them? I think the Titans are going in the right direction.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think they're going to keep hold of these players. Yeah. No, I think I think that'll be a close game. I think might be 10 points in it, 6 to 10 points in that game.
Yeah, I mean, if they can hold on to, if they can sort the defence out, you know, that it's there, isn't it, for them to be
for sure
a finals team, no doubt about it. I mean, they've played some of the rugby they played, not just this year, but certainly the back the 10 games last year. The attacking rugby's been amongst the best I've seen for a while. You know, in competitions, no doubt about it. So, I mean, hopefully they can give Parramatta a game. But I've got to say, I love Clint Gutherson. He's just Mr. Do It All. I don't think he's the fastest. He's not the strongest. He's not the most skillful. He's not the best with the ball in his hands. But he does everything good, and I cannot fault his. You know, I think he's number 1 in like kick return yards, just that sort of thing. He's just engine, and his will to sort of compete and succeed is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, first game up on the Friday morning, which is probably the big game. Well, was the big game of the round before the St. George COVID scare, which was Manly, who sat 6th. Missed a chance to move up the table there, really, to get closer to South and possibly push themselves into that top 4. Hosting St. George, who are 7th, who were on the way up, and now missing obviously Paul Vaughan, who's I think 5th in post-contact meters made, and then they've got several other players whether they decide to sit them out, you know, to the game suspensions. I believe they got 3 to 4 games, I think it is, to all these suspensions. Yeah. And then you've got players backing up from Origin, and you've got players, I think Zach Lomax and can't remember Daniel Alvaro, who aren't even available selection because they're out of the bubble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Does that render? I mean, Turbo possibly backing up, DC possibly backing up from Origin. Does that make it a leveler at all, or?
I think so. I think it's going to be a very close game. That. Well, we'll put it this way: I'm going to tip the Dragons really, because I know it's probably against the grain a little bit there, but I do believe that they're up for a good win soon. A lot of the time when teams go through these off-field issues on the pitch, they all pull together to say we're going to have to do this. We're going to have to make a statement here, and they'll play out of the skin this week. I reckon. I think it'll be close though. You know, 6 points maybe at the most. It's going to be a cracking game.
Got a chance really thinking about it, where there's going to be players who are going to get the opportunity that they wouldn't normally have.
For sure.
You know, with Paul Green, with a guy who's probably going to be livid or still livid with several of these players that have been banned. So there's going to be spots up for grabs. So I think I would still fancy Manly, I'll be honest with you. You know, I think Schuster's going to be in this week. I think possibly playing at stand. I think he's back from injury. and I am excited to see him. I've seen glimpses of him earlier in the season, watching him, and although he's a bit hit and miss at the moment, he's still quite an exciting player
for sure.
So, but it could develop into, I think it could be right. Could be a lot closer than perhaps we first thought. And the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking it might be a nice little tasty tussle. Okay, the other game on Friday night is another interesting one. The Raiders, who scraped themselves back up from 14th to 11th, playing against the Sharks, who just on the edge of the 8th. I don't think the Sharks are going anywhere from there. I think that, excuse me, I think that's their position at best 8th. I don't see them as any better.
No, I think, well, I agree, but and also I think Tom Starling's playing really well for Canberra. He played really well at the weekend, and I think he's moving around really well. So I think they had a bit of a blip the week before Canberra where they got absolutely mullered. However, I think that was a one-off, and I just think that they're going to be too strong this weekend. It's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a tough one, but I think I just can't see past. I don't know why, because Cunliffe won at the weekend, but that was against a team that perhaps did they win at the weekend? Sorry, I got that right. Yeah. Sorry, and so it was against the Warriors, so they're on a bit of a downer, and I think Canberra had a bit of a scare, big scare last weekend, and when you got your fans walking out of the stadium, things start to happen backstage. So they're all playing. They did
play well last week against Manly, but I still think they're way off what they were a couple of years ago. Certainly when Bateman was here, and I don't think they even decided, when Williams was here earlier in the season as well. But yeah, I'd fancy them at home to that one.
Too many changes, I think, is you're leading to they've had too many changes in positions. Canberra,
especially mine, isn't it? Because Dance, Nickel Cotstat, he's been out. I'm not sure if he's back. I don't think if he's out this season. I can't remember. They got Sam Williams in now instead of George Williams. Hodgson's been solid, I suppose. But I mean, Jack Whiten's he's a diamond sawdust player for me. It's great one moment and then non-existent the next. I mean, he's hard to stop when he's in full flow, but he's not a game manager or anything like that. He needs somebody besides him who can control the game, which Caesar did for a bit when he was there, but we talked about Caesar last week. Okay, next one. Storm, who are unbeaten at home against the 9th place Newcastle Knights, who I've got a couple of players back, but I'm not sure if Daniel Saifiti is out, isn't he? I think. I can't remember now. But even with him in it, I don't see. No.
This is points management game for we need to stop the points from flooding in. Simple as that, in my opinion, for the Knights, because you're in 9th. You need to watch your goal difference, your points difference, because at the moment they're on -93. So you don't want to start to slip, especially if the Cowboys start to win a bit more. I think they're going to start drifting away from the 8th place on points difference alone. Never mind, they're obviously going to drop 2 points, but it's very important around the 8th position to get, because they're all on. These teams are all on. There's 3 teams on. I think there's 3 teams on 14 points, 3 teams on 12 points. Around that position. It's good. It's a killer if you're up against Melbourne.
Well, I did this was a few years ago now, and I did a breakdown of what the average it was about 26 to 28 points seems to be like the point that will secure you like a finals place. And that's what you've sort of been aiming for. There's 8 games left, isn't it now? So and that, I suppose the game that I've just missed there, which is Cowboys and Roosters. Cowboys find themselves in the same spot. They're perhaps the bottom team, really, I think, maybe of getting hold of a spot there. I think you pointed out last week the points difference is terrible. So they need to rattle up some. They've got a chance this weekend against the Roosters, who are chugging along, but perhaps reliant upon a few veterans and the contributions of a couple of seasoned pros as well to keep them going. But they're there for the taking. But every team puts a good effort in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we expect that from North Queensland this week?
I don't think they've been doing it. They haven't been consistent enough.
Mm.
You know, I don't really know how to explain North Queensland because they've been so all over the place. The Cowboys in the last since Thurston left, it just shows how I know it wasn't just Thurston who left on that at the end of that year, but they've had big changes, new stadium, obviously money issues off the pitch to make sure that all happens. It all comes down to rebuilding to me. And 10th place to minus 159. Minus 159 at the moment. Everybody above them is 100 points better off. So
that's a lot to come back. That means you're going to have to be 4 points better. You need exactly, you can't just be level 10. You've got to be under.
When you get to that point, you end up having to win matches that are almost unwinnable. And you're on a back burner straight away when you start. So,
and I must say I'm slightly disappointed in how their season's gone. Really, considering I thought Todd Payton when he took over at the Warriors last year towards the end, and I thought he turned them into. They were showing real promise under him, and it's a real shame that he didn't stay there because he's gone to North Queensland. I was expecting him to have the same sort of impact. And it just hasn't happened. I mean, I think Drinkwater's playing very well, and perhaps he posted a question mark for them next year with what's his name, Townsend, and it's Dearden competing as well. That's a good problem to have, isn't it? But I'm slightly disappointed because the one thing Payton got was that he got the Warriors forwards going, which if you can get the Warriors forwards going, that's a big thing for me for Auckland because it is their strength. But you're getting the consistency out of him, and he was starting to get that, but just haven't seen it at all from North Queensland this year. Flashes where they've had games where they've come back from the dead and things like that, of course, but there's too many games where they just haven't been in it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a problem with Queensland at the moment. When was the last time you saw all three Queensland teams and 10 below 10 and below?
Yeah.
The Titans and the Cowboys are almost on the same points, and the Broncos are below both of them. And the Titans are the one moving up. So it's a tale of Queensland at the moment. They've slipped all. I don't know what's going on with Queensland Rugby League, but they need to all get themselves together and sort it out. Maybe whilst all these teams are on the Gold Coast, to get them all having a few beers and get them all signed up. All of this place while they're drunk.
Well, speaking of Broncos, the Broncos is one of the last two games, and 15th against West Tigers, so I think they're 14th, aren't they? 15th against 14th. But I will say I expect this to be a great game. The only reason why is because I love watching West Tigers. I don't know what it is. They always seem to give good game. So they seem to be involved in great game, even though they've been hanging around the bottom half of the table for like the last 4 or 5 years. It seems like every week they usually value for some entertainment. Not saying they're always great, but they don't seem to get flogged that often. And when they fight the lower league teams, I've seen some classic games. But certainly there was a game against the Roosters a couple of years ago when Fanua was playing. Again, it went down to like the last play of the game sort of thing. So they're always competitive. They've got some good players there. Can they go to Brisbane and finally get a win though? I mean, Kevy's under pressure at Brisbane. They're already saying he's starting to get a limited amount of time to see out, to save his job sort of thing. Where do we stand on both of them? Well, where do we stand, I suppose, on Brisbane going forward, and then can West topple them?
Well, the Broncos are just. I can't even start to talk about the Broncos because it was so disappointing last year. And this year they've been no better, in my opinion. And I honestly thought with the coach change that things would improve, but they seem to have not got any better at all. If you look at the Wests, again, talking about how good their attack is, I think this is the thing about West is they're entertaining because they've got a good attack. And it's not necessarily a brilliant attack, they're a very flamboyant attack. And we like rugby that's flamboyant, or that's what we like. And I think that's what it's all about with them. And they do score tries. But the Broncos ship tries. They're a negative 242 at the moment. That's 100 points more than the Wests, and the Wests are only a point above the place above them. And I know I go on about points difference a lot, but it does show how a team is performing. I think week to week, when you put in two close teams together, we're both very similar positions on the table, but one's 100 points worse off than the other on the old points. It's just, to me, that just shows that I can't see any further than a West win.
No, I mean, that ties in what we were saying last week about the blowouts, and that despite being bottom of the table, that the Bulldogs and the Centurions had less blowouts than the Broncos, which, you know, does create its problem itself, because blowouts suggest that your players have given up, doesn't it? I think that's the sort of official definition they kind of attribute to that sort of phrase, that word. So, okay, and then the final game, Rabbitohs against the Bulldogs. Usually an intense battle, no love lost between the two teams. Luke Thompson, while we talked about Luke Thompson, he was singled out for praise on the, one of the things that the NRL do is that they ask people to write in their questions every week, and, you know, sometimes people ask them, and one of them was talking about the Bulldogs and what the senior, I can't remember the chap's name on the NRL, thought about the Bulldogs season. Anybody stand out? And he made a comment about I can't remember his name, the Amarillo in it, not Amarillo. And he did mention Luke Thompson as he was always up for a dig or something like that, you know, having a dig. I don't think he means like, you know, a Wigan sort of grubby dig, you know, just having a go on it. And every time I watched him, I mean, he's been solid. He's been probably usually the best forward on the Canterbury side. You know, occasionally I think Ogden might a couple of times. But generally, he's usually among the, you know, the top formers. Obviously, Josh Jackson as well. What's his name? Souths, a few players backing up from Origin, but you would have to fancy Souths for this one, wouldn't you? Too much firepower out wide.
Yeah, I think once, and I mentioned it earlier, the game this week. Once the first two props are off for the Bulldogs, I don't think they've got anything to give, and I don't necessarily think that's just the props. I just think the whole team just seems to dissipate after, you know, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And last week it was fatal for them. That was when they lost the match, not necessarily by shipping points, but it was when they lost control of the ball essentially, and there was no go forward. You know, Lachlan Lewis again, he should hopefully keep the Bulldogs ticking over if he's playing, if they bother picking him, which I hope they do, you know. But there's just, what can I say? It's third versus.
It's just 16. Not 80 minutes, is there? It's not 80 minutes in them.
There's about 44 minutes in the Dogs.
I mean, well, that blowout thing that they kind of suggest, you know, the suggestion was with the blowout thing was that although Canterbury are losing, the players are still you're not performing. They're still trying. They're still committed. They're still putting the effort in. You know, whereas with the blowouts, you know, they're not doing so.
It won't be a blowout, but it'll be close. But it won't be close as it was this weekend. You know, it'll be.
No, they're definitely a couple of signings away from being any sort of possibly pushing up to 10th.
I think defensively, you know what, the Dogs have got obviously minus 296 point difference, so they're defensively they're not that great. But the last few weeks they've not shipped that many points. You know, they've certainly last week they were in a better position. If you'd been seeing that all week, they might have been in, you know, 12th or 11th place. If they've been coming up with results like that most weeks, close results around that kind of time. But I just don't. It's just the wrong team at the wrong time for the Bulldogs. I know you can't say that in sport. You've got to play whoever's in front of you, but they're going to get beaten. It might be beaten by 20 points. It won't be a walkover, a big score, but it'll be 20 points, I think, at the most. Because the Doggies have got, like you said, they'll carry on to the end. There's no doubt about it. So,
yes. Well, I hope they can improve next year. It'd be good to see them back and back. I know a lot of people don't like them, but I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Bulldogs ever since found out there were all the sorts of immigrants and stuff like that that live in the Canterbury area. So
thanks, Dan.
I was getting picked on. So yeah, okay, that's it for this week on RL Radio, Better Than Lego. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego.